you look at the history of how we went from what I grew up in, which is that, we lived in a culture where the primary insult that another boy threw at another boy while they were beating them up was faggot.
Phails at philosophy.
Oh yeah,
right. That's
you were gay.
Yeah, that's what
I remember that.
You and I were growing up in, right?
Mm-hmm.
To having gay marriage legalized, right?
Yeah.
How did that happen? It happened because a huge sentiment shifted in our country around homosexuality, and that happened because grandmas no longer could support a regime that victimized homosexuals because they had homosexual grandchildren. They had family members.
I've got a question about this.
Right. So,
I don't know that happened everywhere. I think that happened in cities, in urban environments. I think in countrysides and in rural areas, I don't think that transition that you're talking about occurred.
I think you're wrong. Partly because I remember reading the research about this 10 years ago as it was happening, is it was widespread. It was surprisingly rural, right? In terms of the shift of the sentiment. And that doesn't mean that in rural areas, and it's not always rural urban, sometimes we kind of make that breakdown.
Yeah.
There are definitely very conservative urban spaces. There are definitely very progressive rural spaces.
Okay.
Yeah. There's regionalization for sure. Right. And part of that regionalization is that division. But yeah, no, it's not like suddenly those spaces that were deeply anti-queer suddenly became a majority. But they went from being 20% anti-gay marriage to 35% anti-gay marriage, right? That progression happened everywhere. And when you dug into what was going on, the main thing people seemed to be citing as the reason why they shifted was that they had a family member or a friend and they could see the way they suffered.
Oh, you mean, you said that shifted to 35% anti-gay marriage. You mean pro-gay marriage?
Yeah.
They wanted more people to get.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah. But that's
because they saw the suffering in a family member
or a friend or a neighbor.
So it was touch points. It was what we talk about in Buddhism, where you see the suffering in another person, and you really have empathy and compassion, and you don't want other people to suffer.
But you got to be that person to that other person. So if your main strategy is screw you, you have a different political belief for me, you're not my friend, that's a losing strategy.
I think that has gotten greater and greater and greater in this country, to where we will draw relational lines on political opinions. When I was joking with my daughter about voting for Trump, and she was like, I'll never talk to you again.
Yeah.
That's my daughter.
Yeah.
And I think it's very common now. Folks talk about, hey, I'm just going to unfriend people in social media if they post certain things that I don't agree with. And yeah, this chasm, this chasm between our countrymen doesn't allow us to have these touch points for them to feel compassion and to feel empathy, to witness suffering. It's the same thing I think that occurs socioeconomically, where we have very wealthy people in gated communities. They don't ever have to see the suffering of the poor because they've isolated themselves so much so that it never comes into their psyche that the poor have problems, that I should do something to uplift them, because all I see are putting greens and jet streams.
Right. Yeah. No, I think so. Yeah. Isolation is not the strategy. And I think listening, understanding, saying, okay, what was it that drove you to vote if you voted on an economic issue?
Yeah.
Why did you believe that this would lead there? And I just think I think we need to just develop different strategies, and I think those strategies need to be relational.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Back to Trump, and we can maybe talk about this 15 minutes more. He wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. And I think about that
which I read when I was in 5th grade.
I did too. I thought, like, when I was growing up, I think this might be a part of it.
Right.
Trump has been a character in our lives, our
Right.
whole lives.
Right.
He's been a character
I mean,
in Americans' lives since
he-
we were
He
young.
is the kind of like stock character of the Milton Friedman dream.
Yeah. What was the Wall Street?
Mm-hmm.
The Gecko, right?
Mhm. You mean the movie Wall Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where he says greed is good. You know,
Right.
that's the Milton Friedman he talks about. But I think in the art of the deal and the thing we see in Trump's negotiation is not a win-win strategy. It's really like you win when you've taken advantage, when you've gotten the better hand.
Right. Yeah, and that you win when you don't play fair.
Yeah.
Right. And that is the difference between an Adam Smith vision of economic prosperity through capitalism and a Trump vision, right?
Yeah.
This vision is take advantage of the situation as best you can, take what you can get, and go. This vision is you need a system that is well regulated, if open, right? If built around having open markets with a set of rules that people can play by, but which they also develop the moral character to honor.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, like I think that there's a lot of good that can come from markets, right?
Yeah.
And free and open markets. But those can't come without character, which is, I think, what the Buddhist argument is too, right? That it's really about
Oh yeah.
about
Well, they talk about virtues.
who you are
Yeah.
and how you relate to that,
Right.
and building a community in which that you cultivate those virtues amongst yourselves, right? And then you know, wealth would trickle down if the wealthy had the character to share it.
Yeah.
Like,